As we've been talking about the potential qualifiers that we put on representations and warranties, there's one more qualifier I wanted to cover, and that is just basic disclosure. So how does that work? Basically, you have a representation that the buyer's proposed. There's been no release of an environmental hazard on the property. And the seller looks at that and says, well, we actually know about one. We have a one. And by the way, it might have been a material one. And it happened within the last, 6 months. So they can't use time or materiality or knowledge as a qualifier to get out of the problem. So what do? And here what they say is, except as set forth in the disclosure schedules, we've not had a release of an environmental hazard on the property. And then in an attachment to the purchase agreement, they'll that are called the disclosure schedules, they'll say, hey, we had a release of an environmental hazard, and these are the circumstances around it. By disclosing it, the representation is now true. And interestingly, the responsibility for any liability that comes from that shifts from the seller to the buyer. It's now the buyer's issue. Now, the ultimate impact of that in connection with a transaction is the buyer is going to evaluate that known risk, that known issue that's been disclosed, and decide whether it affects the purchase price that they're willing to pay for the business, or whether they need some kind of special indemnification right for issues that arise from that problem. And often we'll see both of those proposed by a buyer, or from representing a buyer will come back with something like that. But the option to disclose these kinds of issues really can help alleviate problems that otherwise would prevent you from being able to make the rep that was proposed.